Welcome, fellow freaks, geeks, and nostalgic peeps to my channel, Slime and Slashers, where, yeah, we talk about everything from Nickelodeon slime to horror movie slashers, but plenty of stuff in between, including books, bitch. Today is one of my favorite types of videos to watch, but I've never really done one before. Today, I'm going to be going through with you guys my 2022 reading stats, and I will also be going through and reacting to some of my 2022 reading goals. Did I accomplish them all? Did I not? Did I fail miserably? Or did I succeed like a beast? Only time will tell. And you don't have to wait long, because right after the short intro, I will get into it and tell you the answers. Alright, so let's go, and we'll be back, and we'll dig into the flippin' awesome nerdy stats. I love being a nerd. Let's go. Welcome back, guys. Okay, I'm so excited. I spent a lot of time writing out these stats, so hopefully you'll enjoy hearing them, because I actually really like looking at this. It gives me a nice overview of how my reading year was, how I did compared to 2021, and I don't know, it just gives you a good idea of what types of things you like. You know, do you need to expand your horizons in any specific area, etc., etc. I will say, this stat list is not as thorough as it could be, because I did use Storygraph to compile a lot of these stats, but I also went through and counted things manually by, like, ticking off little things on my notebook. I was like, okay, here's what one book published in the 70s, the 80s, blah, blah, blah. But then I checked it on Storygraph as well. But I actually started using a reading statistic sheet. So I'm very excited. It's a little Google spreadsheet, and I think it'll be really cool to use that to keep track, and it'll give me a very, very, I think, accurate account of what I'm reading. Whereas sometimes on Storygraph and on Goodreads, they've got, like, the dates wrong, or it, like, doesn't list it, so it doesn't really compile with the rest of your stats. Anyway, that's all, like, nerdy mumbo jumbo, but you know I'm right. You know it makes a difference sometimes, and it affects things. So my statistics sheet will help me avoid those problems. So let's get into my actual stats from 2022. And I will say, just a little teaser, my freaking book award ceremony, the Kelsi's Choice Awards instead of the Kids' Choice Awards. I have been slimed, so it's very appropriate because both involve slime. I'm not going to re-slime myself, but I might show you a clip from when I already slimed myself. But anyway, that is coming very soon, and then after that, I'll do my top 10 list, I'll do my least favorite list, I'll do a lot of, you know, looking back on 2022 types of things throughout all of January. I have it scheduled, it is coming, but I have to do the awards first. Alright, so starting off, I read 129 books in 2022, compared to 81 books read in 2021. Now, I've told this story before, I am a newer reader. I've only really been reading for 2.5 years consistently. This year alone, read more books than I read from, like, age 0 to age flippin', when did I start reading? 30? Yeah. So basically, for the first 30 years of my life, I didn't even read 129 total books probably, but I did this year. That was my total read in 1 year. That's crazy to me. And so 81 at the time last year was really good. And also, I didn't really use audiobooks at all last year. So I think the jump in my total is due to mainly using audiobooks, also reading more middle grade. That does help with reading more books because they're shorter, easier to get through, etc., etc. So 3 of my 129 books were rereads. So 3 total rereads. The rereads were The Hellbound Heart by Clive Barker, The Shining by Stephen King, and My Best Friend's Exorcism by Grady Hendrix. So out of the 129 books, 127 of them were fiction books, and only two were nonfiction. So that's quite a freaking discrepancy between the two, but hey, I hope to read a little bit more nonfiction in 2023, this year that we're in right now. I also hope to read a lot more non-horror books, because basically the majority of what I read was horror. I know that Storygraph technically classified some of my reads as fantasy and thriller. I really don't consider anything I read truly like a thriller or a true pure fantasy book, at least from my perspective. So I don't know how they base their classifications, but anyway, I kind of disagree a tiny bit. However, next year, I'm going to truly read some pure fantasy. I'm going to read some nonfiction. I'm going to read, I say next year, it's this year now. I'm getting confused with the years. You guys know what I mean. All right, so let's break down the star ratings. I had 29 freaking 5-star reads, and that is incredible. And as my friend Amy Noel said recently, her channel is Amy Noel Reads, she was like, I love that for me. And I do love that for me because that's freaking awesome. I might give away 5 stars a little too easy, but if I enjoy a book, I'm giving it 5 stars, or a 4.5 stars. So not far behind, I gave 25 books 4.5 stars. I gave 31 books 4 stars. I gave 31 books 3.5 stars. I gave 9 books 3 stars. I gave 1 book 2.5 stars, and I gave 2 books 2 stars. I had 0 1-star books, which is awesome. I also had 0 1.5 star books. I had 1 book that was unrated, so that was the book Cows. Because it's so gross, like how can you rate it? I don't even know. Did I have kind of a fun time reading it? I guess in the fact that I proved to myself that I could read it. Otherwise, I don't know. I really don't even know how to talk about the book. So anyway, go back to my January wrap-up of 2022 if you want to hear me talk about Cows, but it's unrated. I did not give it a star rating. My average rating is very high, and as, again, to quote Amy Noel Reads, I love that for me, my average rating is 4.09 stars, bitch! Yes! That is great. I freaking love that. So, the month with the highest average rating for me was March of 2022. My average rating was 4.5 stars. That was a month which I dubbed Must Read March, in which I did a little thematic reading month where I read a whole bunch of books that I felt like everyone else had read but I hadn't read, and books that I had been dying to get to but had not, for some reason or another, gotten to. So I think that was one of the reasons why my ratings were so high, is because books that were universally loved, I chose to read in that month, and I called them must-read books. So I think that worked out for me. Maybe I should do another must-read month, but I don't really have that officially planned or anything for 2023. All right, so my month with the lowest average rating was January with 3.79 average stars. So that sucks for me, but at the same time, I remember enjoying my January reads. So I did read a lot of middle grade books, which I tend to rate lower. When I say middle grade, I mean vintage, kind of cheesy middle grade, like Spine Tinglers or Graveyard School books. Those are like Goosebump knockoff books. They're not award-winning type of middle grade books. There are wonderfully written 5-star deserving middle grade books, but I don't think flippin' Spine Tingler books are usually among them. However, I'm not knocking the series. I did enjoy my reads. It's just I rated them, you know, mid-level, like 3.5 stars, hence why my average rating for January is around 3.79. That makes sense to me. All right, so now let's see how many 5-star books I gave out during each month of the year of 2022. In January, which was, again, just to reiterate, my month with the lowest average rating, I gave 0 5 stars, apparently, which I don't recall that. I think I had at first given Misery by Stephen King, which I read in January, a 5-star, but then I went back and changed it to a 4.5. And I stand by that change, so it's still a great book, but I did struggle a little bit in the beginning. It felt a little slow at the beginning. Still wonderfully written, still an awesome book overall. So in February, I gave out 4 5-star ratings. In March, I also had 4 books that were 5 stars, so that's pretty great. 4 books in 1 month that are 5-star rated, that's awesome. In April, which was my readathon old school April, I gave out 2 5 stars. In May, I had 3 5-star reads. In June, I had 3 as well. In July, I only had 1, but it was a freaking banger of a 5-star read. I remember it. There's a freaking fly bug thing. Get out of here. You're not helping me with my stats, you bug. In August, I had 2 5-star reads. In September, I also had 2. In October, I had 1. In November, I had 2. And in December, I had freaking 5 5-star reads. So obviously, December, that was my month with the highest amount of 5-star reads. And then closely behind December, in February and March, I had 4 5-star reads each. So that's pretty freaking amazing, those 3 months. All right, so 8 of the books I read were 500 pages or higher. So I read quite a few chunkers in freaking 2022, which I'm happy about. And I feel like I finally conquered my fear of long books. I still get a little, you know, tentative and hesitant about starting them. I still feel a little nervous, but I know I can do them. I've read freaking 8 freaking 500 plus page books, so I know I can do it. I read 44 books that were between 300 and 299 pages. And then finally, I read 77 books that were either 300 pages or less. So I read a lot of short books. However, I'm happy with that spread. So the longest book I read using audio was It by Stephen King. And look at this fantastic Tim Curry version. I found this in freaking Maine, and I was like, I must have it. Actually, was it in Maine or was it in freaking Philadelphia? I don't remember, but I got this out of town, basically. And I already had an edition of It, but I was like, I need this edition with Tim Curry on the front as Pennywise. So yes, I read this using audio. The audio was awesome. Not a 5-star read, but pretty close. It was either a 4 or 4.5. Very enjoyable, great coming-of-age story. Has some issues, but overall, I still really loved it. Yeah, pretty damn long. And technically the longest book I read, but again, I used audio. So now for the book that was the longest book I read with my eyeballs only, not using audio at all, would be Toady by Mark Morris. And this was a buddy read with my friend Alex. She's over at the channel, The Bookubus. Check her out. She is the queen of vintage horror, and I love her so much. So Toady, this is about, let me tell you, this is flippin' 702 pages. So I read 702 pages with my eyes only, and you know, the text isn't so big, but it isn't super small either. But I'm very, very proud of this, and this was a freaking great read. I love this book. So yeah, this is technically the longest book I read with my eyeballs only. And then the shortest book I read all year was The Halloween Mouse by Richard Lehman. And this is a little picture book, and that's why it's the shortest. I think it's only about, if I had to guess, because I'm doing it from memory, I think it's 32 pages long. And that's what Storygraph said, but the pages aren't even numbered. But it's very, very short, but it's freaking cute. Don't think you could just go and find this, by the way, though. It's super expensive online, unfortunately. But I'm happy to own a copy. I did splurge, and I treated myself. I'm very glad I did, though, because I freaking love mice. I used to have pet mice, and so that is why I'm extra attached to this book, because it's so cute. And it's weird to say that a book by Richard Lehman is cute, because usually they're gross, but also trashy and fun at the same time. Most of the time. Not always, but anyway. This was very different for a Richard Lehman read. It was a cute kid's picture book, and I loved it. My total amount of pages read, approximately, because I don't know how accurate Storygraph is. Again, when I'm using my spreadsheet this year in 2023, it'll be a lot more accurate. But for 2022, according to Storygraph, it says 35,775 pages, which I thought for 129 books, honestly, the page count would be higher, especially because I read 8 books that were at least 500 pages or more. However, I don't think 35,000 plus is anything to snuff at or anything, but I just have seen some of my friends' numbers be a little bit higher, and that's why I was like, why isn't mine higher? But there are quite a few friends who got into the 200s or over 150 books read in a year. I only got to 129. I say only, I'm very proud, don't get me wrong. My average book length was 287 pages, which I think is pretty good. It's not too short, not too long. I think it's a good medium type of number. Alright, so most read in a month. I read the most in November, and I read specifically 4,696 pages, and I read a total of 16 books. So that is pretty freaking awesome. I'm very proud of that. My month-to-month chart in terms of how many books did I read per month, in January I read 13 books, which is perfect because my birthday is January the 13th, so it's very thematic there. In February, I read 9 books. In March, 10 books. April, 13 books. May, 10 books. June, 9 books. July, 7 books. August, 14 books. September, 6 books. October, 10 books. November, 16 books. And December, 12 books. So as I said, November was my most books read, and clearly September was my least amount read, which was only 6 books. July was second least amount read, which was 7 books. But in July, I read a lot of my chunky books, like It was in July, Toady was in July, Boy's Life by Robert McCammon, which is over 500 pages, was in July. So lots of my chunky books were in July, because coming-of-age horror, which that was the month I was reading coming-of-age horror specifically, they're traditionally very long books, and so they all fell in July, and that is why I'm not bothered by the low amount of books there, because I know what types of books I was reading. In September, I was just really busy. I think I was just getting out of a slump or something. where I was gearing up for October. There's some sort of reason there that it was only 6 books. I don't know what the reason is because I don't remember, but I can only guess, and I think it's just because I was busy. The oldest book I read in terms of publishing year, A Christmas Carol, and I read the version that was free online, but I listened to the audio narrated by Tim Curry, and it was freaking incredible. I love Tim Curry, just to reiterate that again, because I just touted how much I liked him when I talked about the Tim Curry cover of the It paperback. But yes, The Christmas Carol, of course, by Charles Dickens, was first published in 1843, so that is by far the oldest book I read. The second oldest book I read was And Then There Were None by Agatha Christie, and that was first published in 1939, and I freaking love that book. That was awesome. By the way, A Christmas Carol and freaking And Then There Were None were both 5-star books, just to let y'all know. And the third oldest book I read was The Dreaming Jewels, which was basically the only pure seeming sci-fi-ish book that I read. It felt more sci-fi to me. There were some kind of spooky elements, but it felt more sci-fi than horror. That was first published in 1950. So, not too shabby, but don't worry, I've got the other decades kind of broken down as well. This stat graph is what I'm most excited to look at with you guys, because it's the stat that I like the most. Because I like to see if I'm reading from all kinds of, decades or not, or if I'm concentrating into new releases or just old releases. I am proud to say that it looks like I have a very decent spread across lots of different decades. So here we go. I read 9 books that were published in the 70s. I read 31 books that were published in the 80s. I read 27 books that were published in the 90s. I read 6 books that were published between the years of 2000 and 2009. I read 38 books published between the years of 2010 and 2020. I read 4 books published in the year 2021, and I read 11 books that were released in 2022, so essentially new releases, which really blew my mind because I didn't think I read that many new releases because I don't usually read or care about new releases very often, but it just so happened that a few of the books were new releases. Like, I know, for instance, a middle grade book was a new release, and I know that I read 2 Buffy books that were newly released in 2022, among other things. So I'm really happy with this spread. And also, here's an interesting stat. Over 50% of the books I read were published before the year 2010, and I think that's awesome. Here are some random stats that I don't guarantee, but I'm pretty sure no one else is counting these ridiculous stats. I read 5 cannibal-themed books. Some of them were a surprise that it was about cannibalism. It popped up out of nowhere. Others, they were clearly cannibal books, and I knew that going in. I read 6 animal attack books, and I love animal attack. It's one of my favorite subgenres of horror. So yes, I'm very happy with that number. I read 6 zombie-themed books, which is a lot for me, and I'm not really a huge zombie fan. But in honor of my friend Kat, we did celebrate Zombie Awareness Month in May of 2022, and we read a good amount of zombie books during that time, and I read a few sprinkled throughout the year as well. I read 11 books featuring carnivals, clowns, freak shows, or amusement parks because I had a thematic month of reading that surrounded those specific settings and themes. I read 37 paperbacks from hell, and when I say paperbacks from hell, I don't mean books by Stephen King. I'm discluding Clive Barker, I'm discluding Dean Koontz, and I'm not counting any vintage YA or any vintage middle grade, like books written by R.L. Stine. Some of these authors are mentioned in the book Paperbacks from Hell, but what I consider a paperback from hell are these old school vintagey books that are like hidden gems of horror, whether that be because of the cover, it's a hidden gem because it's awesome, or the story itself is actually great, but not a lot of people talk about it today. Whereas King, everybody knows about King. Barker, pretty popular. Koontz, very popular. If I had read Anne Rice, I wouldn't have counted her as a paperback from hell, although she is, of course, mentioned in Paperbacks from Hell. Shirley Jackson's kind of one of the founding mothers of horror, and I don't necessarily think of her as a paperback from hell type of writer, so I wouldn't have counted her either. But I didn't read anything by Shirley Jackson in 2022, so I didn't have to debate whether or not to count it. So yes, 37 total, not including all the King I read, and the Barker I read, etc., and not including R.L. Stine. I read 12 middle grade books, and that includes newer middle grade as well as vintage middle grade. I also read 12 YA books, and again, that included vintage YA, and it also includes newer YA. In fact, some brand spanking new YA I had dug into, and also some brand spanking new middle grade, like new releases that were released in 2022. So that's where some of my new releases came from. And then, as I said, I read one picture book, which was The Halloween Mouse that I showed you. The author that I read the most books by was Stephen King, because I did a fun year-long project with my friend Kat. She's on YouTube at the channel Kat's Novel Adventures, and we read 11 King books and 4 Stephen King short stories. Now, some of the books are technically a part of short story collections, but they're sold as an individual book. For instance, The Mist. So I counted that as one of the books because it's sold as a standalone novel. Same thing with The Langoliers. Originally, it was published as part of a collection. However, I bought the paperback book, The Langoliers, which is a standalone book, so I counted it as a book. And again, the 4 short stories were just little stories I read that are published as part of collections that King has put out. And I did not count those as books read, just as stories read. I read 6 books by R.L. Stine. That's between Fear Street and Goosebumps, of course. And then I read 6 books by my newly discovered favorite author, Robert McCammon. I discovered him in 2022, and I wanted to take a deep dive right after I discovered him and read as much by him as I could at the time. I'm continuing on with my Robert McCammon journey now in 2023, and I'm so freaking pumped and jazzed to keep reading more by him. So let's take a look at new authors that I read in 2022 versus authors that I had already read from before. So in 2022, I read 76 new to me authors, and that is great, but it's a very high number. And on the other side of the spectrum, I only read from 19 authors that I had already read from before. So people like Ruby Jean Jensen, people like R.L. Stine, people like Stephen King, all authors I had already discovered prior to 2022. Alright, so now I do want to reflect on some of my 2022 goals while I also go through some stats from 2022. And this is straight from my 2022 reading goals video I did. And in that video, I said I wanted to read more books by Stephen King. Well, frick, I read 11 books by Stephen King. I said I wanted to read more books by Joe Hill. I didn't read one book by Joe Hill, so I didn't accomplish that. I said I wanted to read more by Grady Hendrix. I only read one Hendrix book, and it was a reread. I said I wanted to read more by Richard Lehman. I read 4 Richard Lehman books, so I definitely accomplished that. More by Graham Masterton. I read 1 book by him. More by Matt Serafini. Again, I read 1. David Sodergren. I read 1. Tim Meyer. I did read 1 more book by Tim Meyer. Michael McDowell. I read 1 more book by Michael McDowell. And I wanted to read more Pike, as in Christopher Pike. And I read 2 more Christopher Pike books in 2022. Another goal for 2022 was to read books by Dan Simmons. I didn't get to that. So I still have not read 1 book by Dan Simmons yet. However, I have made Summer of Night by Dan Simmons a priority for this year, 2023. So we will see if I can finally get to him in 2023. So my goal was to finally read a book by Robert McCammon. I definitely accomplished that, and I said I read 6 books by him. I wanted to read a book or books by D.A. Fowler. I read 3, so I read quite a lot of D.A. Fowler. Of course, she's also known as Deborah Fowler, but yes, I read a lot by her. Anaya or Anya Alborn, I don't really know how to say it. Nobody does, apparently. We all say, like, I don't know. I wanted to read a book by her, and I read 2 books by her in 2022. So I basically accomplished reading from all of those authors except for Joe Hill and Dan Simmons. And out of that long list, I think that's pretty damn good. I also wanted to read more Fear Street, which I did. I wanted to read more Goosebumps. I only read 2, which I wish it would have been more, but I did technically read more. I had goals to find some rare paperback from hell books that I had been looking for. The list was Cold Front, In Layman's Terms, The Halloween Mouse, Joyride, and Friday the 13th books. I already own 1 Friday the 13th book. It's like a little YA vintage series of books. And the one I own, it was gifted to me by my lovely friend Alex, who I mentioned already, the Bookubus. So thank you so much again, Alex. I treasure that book. It's always on my desk, so I could always see it displayed right next to me during the day while I'm working. I didn't find any of those books except for The Halloween Mouse, which I bought online. I didn't find it at a used bookstore. So that's a bummer, especially because I really wanted Cold Front. I did find an online edition of Joyride, so I could at least read it maybe in 2023, because Joyride is a slasher book that a lot of people speak very highly of, and I want to read it really bad. So my goal was to read at least 50 books in 2022. I far surpassed that by getting to 129. I also had a goal to start up my book club in January of 2022, which not only did I start it, but I continued it all year. We took a break in November because I was hosting a readathon, and we took a break also in December because of the holidays. But let me give you my book club stats. I will be releasing a full book club retrospective very, very soon. It probably won't come until February, but it'll come right before I have my first meeting and live stream for my book club in 2023. So look forward to that. I read 18 book club reads, and that's pretty badass. And the reason why I read more than 12, it's because some months I read 2 books, and I gave people the option to read one, the other, or both with me. And then I had live streams for each of the books except for one. So basically 18 club reads and 17 live stream chats. The only book I didn't have a live show for was Slugs by Sean Hudson, and that's just because nobody was talking about it on my Discord, and also it was just such a fast-paced, trashy read that I didn't feel like there was much to discuss. I was like, we're gonna come on, say how trashy it was, and that's about all we can say. Every other book I felt like there was a lot of discussion to be had, or at least we could say some things and break some things down. But look out for the future book club wrap-up. I will talk about which books we read, which seemed to be the most popular with everybody else, which were my favorites, which I gave 5 stars, which were my least favorites, or maybe if I only had one least favorite, I'll talk about that, etc., etc. We'll break it all down in the future, so look out. I also wanted to do my Year of King project, which I accomplished. Kat and I literally read Stephen King every single month of the year. So check, check, that is done off of the 2022 goal list. I wanted to do some booktuber collabs, and I wanted to host some on my channel, which I did host my first collab. It was for my Readathon Old School April, where I asked people to give suggestions for books that were similar to Are You Afraid of the Dark episodes, and I thought that went over really well. I also created my first tag video. I also answered, I think, my first tag video, I think that was in 2022. I also participated in other people's collabs, specifically my friend Juan over at the channel Plagued by Visions. So yeah, I think I did a lot of interesting things. I also co-hosted my first readathon with other people, and that would be Christmas Evil. I also participated in other booktubers readathons, and I'll talk about that in a minute. I wanted to host a lot of thematic reading months and just have personal thematic reading months in 2022, and I believe I accomplished that goal. So just to go through with you some of the flippin' numbers, I hosted 4 solo readathons, and I co-hosted a readathon, so 5 total readathons that I was a host for in some way, shape, or form, and really, really proud of that. That's a high number of readathons to be involved in. So yes, some of them were more extensive than others. I know one of my readathons didn't even have prompts, which would be the slasher readathon. So these are the readathons I did. Kelsi's Carnival, which was in February. Old School April, which was where we read all kinds of old books. That was not only a readathon, but it was also a watchathon, so that was extra fun. The slasher readathon, as I said, didn't have any prompts. That was just a general theme, and that was in June, and lots of people ended up participating in that. And then finally, Nostalgic November was my last solo readathon I hosted, and that was a lot of fun. Lots of people on Instagram were participating, and the one I co-hosted, as I said, Christmas Evil. I also participated in 3 other readathons hosted by other people. That includes Spring Flingoween, which took place at the same time as my Old School April readathon. I was able to do both, and I did talk about both in a vlog or a couple of vlogs. I also participated in Ollie's event, Garb August. Check out his channel, Criminale, he's wonderful. And I also participated in Halloweekend, which was hosted by a whole bunch of fantastic people, and Books with Lexi, that's basically her brainchild, so go check out her channel, she's fabulous. I also did a 1-month-long Instagram challenge during April called Sick Sad April, hosted by my friend, who coincidentally, her name is April, and she's amazing, fantastic, wonderful person. Check out her freaking Instagram. She has some of the best pictures ever. So outside of my readathons, I also had 3 thematic months of reading that were just personal themes. One was Must Read March, which I kind of mentioned. May, I read zombie books. And then I also read Coming of Age in July. So those are some specific themes that I was digging into on top of the readathons. So basically there were only 2 months that I didn't have any themes for my reading, and that would be January, which I tried to read cold books, but it was basically just mood reading. And then September I had no theme at all. I was just kind of gearing up for Halloween. So essentially I accomplished freaking almost all of my goals for 2022 that I had written out and proclaimed in a video that I wanted to accomplish. So, woo! Pat myself on the back. Sorry, gotta do it. When you have a good year, I say, let it be known. Make yourself feel good about it. And I want you guys to do the same for yourselves. And if you didn't accomplish all your goals, it's okay. That's something to strive for. And if you don't even like setting goals, like my friend Michelle over at the channel Michelle's Melancholia, that's okay too, because sometimes it's a little daunting. That can actually make you start to get a little negative and sad when you feel like you're not accomplishing the goals. So think about ways that you can enrich your reading life that are not based on numbers. Maybe just things that are more general, things that you just want to concentrate on, that you won't get so upset over, and you won't have to focus on the actual numbers of things. But I do like numbers, so I'm going to go over some stats for my YouTube channel now. In 2022, I filmed and edited 86 freaking videos. 86, bitch. That's a lot. When you spend like over 4 hours editing each video, that's a freaking lot. That's a ton of hours. I also hosted 44 live stream videos in 2022. Some were about movies, some were about books, some were about both. So in 2022, I released a total, including the edited videos and the live stream videos, a total of 130 videos. Yes. Keep on killing it. I think I did really good. Specifically, out of those 130, 18 vlogs were part of that. I really wanted to do more vlogs in 2022, and I accomplished that. So I love all my vlogs. That's some of my favorite content ever. So here's some videos I'm most proud of. Again, like I said, any of my vlogs, I honestly really love my vlogs. I vlogged all throughout Old School April. I vlogged all throughout Halloween weekend. I vlogged the entirety of Christmas Evil. So I did more vlogs than ever. So if you're new to my channel and you want to discover some more content, here are some of my favorite videos and some of the videos in 2022 that I'm most proud of. So I released a birthday travel vlog, and it was also a reading and shopping vlog, and that one I went to Maine, we also went to Massachusetts, and we also went to New Hampshire, all within just like 4 days, my boyfriend and I, and lots of book shopping, lots of good food pictured. I like that I combined book shopping with like travel vlogging. So I was proud of that way that one turned out. I was trying to make a snowman and failed. I love the music in that one. Also a video that was a beast to make, not only in the editing process, but mainly in the organization process, because I had to pull all of these books off of my shelves. I had a video that I released that was the top 50 favorite vintage horror paperback covers that I've hauled on my channel. That was freaking hardcore and really hard to do, but I'm really proud of it. Another video that I love, hauling tons of books, and that included vintage middle grade and adult horror, plus book shopping and a travel vlog. This vlog is special mainly because I got to hang out with my friend Cameron Chaney over at the channel Library Macabre, and he's in the vlog. Not for long, just a very short clip, but I also show books that he and I bought together on our shopping journey at the end, like during the book haul part of the vlog. And I also just show the stores we went to, and I just really loved it. I also talked about the experience of the trip and just meeting Cameron in general and hanging out with him all day and how fun that was. So that one's special to me because I got to meet a great friend for the first time in person, and that was awesome. Also, I did a video called the Carnival Horror Book Awards. Very happy with that one. I basically gave out awards after I had my whole carnival-themed month of reading, in which I read 11 books, all about carnivals, clowns, freak shows, or amusement parks, as I said earlier. Alright, another video, Readathon and Watchathon announcement, my Old School April announcement video, and included tons of 80s and 90s book and movie recs, and that I recommended so much stuff. It was a beast to edit. Really pleased with how that one came out for the most part. Another fun one that's a vlog specifically unboxing my vintage horror paperbacks plus a St. Patrick's Day reading vlog. So basically it's my documentation of St. Patty's Day and, you know, the entire week leading up to the actual holiday. And then my Christmas Evil tag video, which I think is the most ridiculous video I ever filmed. I accidentally knocked over my ring light. I turned evil. I started off nice, turned evil, and I was all red, and I was like, I acted possessed or something. But honestly, any of my vlogs from 2022, I honestly like any of them. I'm really proud of them. And even if no one likes them and everyone hates them and they're all like, get out of here, we don't care about your vlogs, I freaking love having kind of this documentation of my life and what was going on at these certain times throughout 2022 and, you know, into 2021 when I did vlogs as well. I have, you know, that is a little time capsule to look back on. So I think that's really special, and that's why I really like vlogs. So that's why I always make my vlogs a little bit more than just a reading vlog. Usually I'm documenting stuff in my life. I'm showing stuff, I'm hauling stuff, I'm showing what I'm eating and doing, and I like to have it be more than just book/reading updates, because I think you can do so much with a reading vlog that is very entertaining, giving people like glimpse into your life. And that's why I enjoy vlogs, and that's why I think you could check out any of the 18 vlogs I did and be pretty pleased and get an idea of what I'm like in real life, like not even during an edited video, because I feel like my vlogs, I'm so natural in them, I just kind of talk. I feel like I talk just like me here too, but you get it. I'm just kind of like not even dressed up. I'm just like, I'm disheveled, it's me. And it is really like me, bare bones me. So yeah, I really like all of those, and I think if you wanted to check out more by me, those would give you a good idea of what my content is like. The first book I read in 2022, this is a stat I almost forgot. First book was The New Year's Party by R.L. Stine, and the very last book I read was a reread, and that was The Shining by Stephen King. And I think I started off the year pretty good with a nice, easy, flippin' Fear Street read, and I ended also on a high note with a reread that I loved. You know, The Shining by Stephen King. I love that book. Still do, even after the reread. Alright guys, that was my year for 2022 in terms of the numbers. I would love to know about your numbers. And if you don't count things, don't worry about it. Tell me how your 2022 was in general. Did you watch anything great? Did you find a new favorite book? Did you have anything that stuck out to you? What was your, favorite read? What would you recommend that you loved from 2022 that I check out? Whether that be a movie, show, book, music, whatevs. Anything you think I'd like. Let me know. Comment below. I always love hearing you guys' opinions, and it's so much more meaningful when you guys interact with me and vice versa. By the way, I am slowly catching up with comments. It's very hard though. For this time guys, that is it for me though. We went through a lot of freaking numbers. It's time to freaking brush it off and start anew. So I wish you guys a very happy beginning of the new year. I hope it's going well for you. Until next time guys, you know what you can do. Keep on killing it. Bye guys.